Hello, everyone, and welcome to our training on gender diversity, a very important course. And this course is actually brought to you by the Institute for Crisis Resolution, Peace Building and Conciliation, ICRPC. Gender diversity course is very interesting course. It is fully packed and it has 10 modules. 10 modules. We are going to understand gender. We are going to look at the various concepts and definitions of gender. My name is Ambassador Dr. Abdul Wahid Odewale. I am your lead facilitator for this training, for this course on gender diversity, and I am from the Institute for Crisis Resolution, Peace Building, and Conciliation. Let us look at a breakdown of what we intend to cover as far as gender diversity is concerned. Module 1 will look at an introduction to gender diversity, where we will look at understanding gender concepts and their definitions. We will also look at importance of gender diversity in society and workplace. We'll also look at historical context and evolution of gender roles. And of course, we'll look at course objectives and expectations. From there, we will proceed to module 2, under which we will look at gender identity and expression. We will explore gender identity beyond the binary. We will also look at gender expression and its significance, in addition to intersectionality, how gender intersects with other identities. And of course, we will look at some case studies in Module 2 where we talk about diverse gender identities. We'll also move to Module 3, where we will look at gender equality and equity. We will discuss and define gender equality and gender equity. We'll look at barriers to gender equality. We'll also talk about strategies for promoting gender equity, and also we'll pick some case studies there on successful gender equity initiatives. We'll also go to Module 4, where we will look at gender in the workplace, that is, gender diversity in professional settings, and overcoming gender bias and stereotypes. We'll also look at creating inclusive work environments. We'll also pick some case studies in Module 4, where we'll look at gender diversity programs in organizations. We'll go to Module 5, under which we will discuss legal and policy frameworks, where we will discuss international and national gender equality laws. We would look at gender policies and their implementation, rights and protection for diverse gender identities, and we'll also look at some case studies too, where we'll talk about policy impact on gender diversity. We'll also discuss Module 6. We'll go to Module 6, where we'll look at gender diversity and education. We'll discuss it in detail. We'll look at gender bias in educational materials and practices. We'll also look at promoting gender diversity in schools and universities. And then we'll discuss inclusive curricula and teaching strategies, in addition to case studies on gender inclusive educational programs. From there, we'll proceed to Module 7, where we will be discussing gender, media, and representation, under which we will look at gender representation in media and popular culture. We'll also look at impact of media on gender perceptions. We'll talk about strategies for improving gender representation and also some case studies in media campaigns promoting gender diversity. Module 8 will be looking at gender diversity and health, where we'll look at gender differences in health and healthcare access. And of course, addressing health disparities, where we'll also look at gender sensitive healthcare practices, in addition to case studies where we will discuss health initiatives for gender diverse reputations. Module 9 will look at gender based violence and protection, GBV, gender based violence and protection, under which we will look at understanding gender-based violence, legal and social protections, and also support services and resources, in addition to case studies on interventions and prevention programs. And finally, Module 10 will cover future trends and advocacy, where we are going to look at emerging issues in gender diversity, and of course, advocacy and activism in gender rights. And we'll also look at building alliances and networks. And of course, we'll look at as a capstone project, we will talk about developing a gender diversity action plan, which is also an essential aspect. But first of all, let us quickly now move to start. Let's start with module 1, introduction to gender diversity. Understanding gender. What are the concepts, the definitions? What is gender diversity? First of all, gender diversity, encompasses a spectrum of gender identities and expressions, recognizing that gender is not solely a binary concept. That is, it is not solely a binary concept of male and female, but it is a complex interplay of biological, psychological, and sociocultural factors. Now, there are some key terms and concepts. I will take this again. Gender diversity encompasses a spectrum of gender identities and expressions, recognizing that gender is not solely a concept of male and female. That is not a binary concept, but it is a complex interplay of biological, psychological, and even sociocultural factors. Now we need to understand some key terms and concepts. First of all, these key terms and concepts include: 1, sex. What is sex? Of course, we know that sex has to do with, it refers to biological differences, including chromosomes, hormonal profiles, and even internal and external sex organs. That is, the most simplest definition of sex. Then the word itself, gender. What does gender mean? Gender is a social and cultural construct. A social and cultural construct that relates to behaviors, roles, expectations, and even activities in society. That is gender. Now, when we go to the next aspect, we begin to look at gender identity. What is gender identity? Gender identity is an individual's personal sense of their own gender, which may or may not correspond with their sex assigned at birth. Yes, that is gender identity. The way an individual senses his own gender, it may not correspond, or it may correspond, or it may not even correspond with their sex that is, assigned at birth. Then we have gender, expression. Gender expression. Gender expression has to do with how a person expresses their gender identity through their clothing, through their behavior, through their posture, and other forms of, presentation. That is gender identity. The way a person, expresses their own gender identity. The way, the way a person expresses their own gender. Of course, it may correspond and may not correspond. Now, let us look at non-binary. Non-binary is a spectrum of gender identities that are not exclusively male or female. Yes, non-binary, a spectrum of gender identities that are not exclusively male or female. Don't forget, we are picking them one after the other. Gender identity is an individual's personal sense of their own gender, which may or may not correspond with their sex assigned at birth. While gender expression is how a person expresses their own gender identity through their clothing, through behavior, through posture, and other forms of presentation. The non-binary is a spectrum of gender identities that are not exclusively male or what? Female. Now, transgender describes individuals whose gender identity differs from the sex they were assigned at birth. Transgender. Individuals whose gender identity differs from the sex they were assigned at birth. And we have cisgender. Cisgender, C-I-S gender. It describes individuals whose gender identity aligns with the sex they were assigned at birth. Take that. So understanding this concept is crucial for fostering an inclusive environment where all gender identities are recognized and respected. Now, let us quickly get this very clearly. What are the importance of gender diversity in a society and the workplace. Importance of gender diversity in society and the workplace. Why does gender diversity matters? Number one reason why gender diversity is essential is for social justice and equity, which involves ensuring all individuals, regardless of gender, have equal opportunities and rights. Two, why gender diversity also matters is enhanced decision making. Diverse perspectives lead to more comprehensive and innovative solutions. That is another reasons and another importance of gender diversity in society and in the workplace. Another importance is for the economic benefits, because organizations that embrace gender diversity often see improved financial performance and even productivity. Another importance of gender diversity is cultural competence. A diverse workforce, a diverse workforce better understands and meets the needs of a diverse customer base. That is another importance. And of course, the last but not the least, is legal compliance. So adhering to laws and regulations that mandate equality and non-discrimination based on gender. These are the major importance of gender diversity in the society and in the workplace. So in society, gender diversity promotes a more inclusive and equitable environment where everyone can contribute and thrive. Very important. Now, let us look at the historical context and evolution of gender roles. The historical context and evolution of gender roles. Gender roles have evolved significantly over time. The traditional roles, historically, societies often adhered to strict gender roles, with men typically seen as breadwinners and women seen as homemakers. But over time, there have been the growth in feminist movements. Feminine movement started in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. These movements have challenged and changed societal perceptions of gender roles, advocating for women's rights and gender equality. Now we have some modern developments. This modern development has to do with recent decades. There have been growing recognition of non-binary and transgender identities, leading to more inclusive policies and practices. So, understanding this historical context help us appreciate the progress made and the challenges that remain in achieving true gender diversity. Now, what are the objectives of this course? Course objectives and expectations. The objectives of this course are to: one, develop a comprehensive understanding of gender diversity and its importance. Two, to explore the intersectionality of gender with other identities. That is the objective of this course. And of course, another objective is three, to examine strategies to promote gender equity and inclusion. Another objective of this course is to what? To analyze case studies of successful gender diversity initiatives. And five, to understand the legal and policy frameworks supporting gender diversity. And additionally or finally, to promote gender diversity in education, in media, and also in healthcare. So expectations for this course include active participation, respectful dialogue, critical thinking, and a commitment to applying the concepts learned to real world scenarios. Let us move to module 2. Module 2 talks about gender identity and expression. Gender identity and expression. Now, let us explore gender identity beyond the binary. We know that gender identity is a deeply personal and intrinsic sense of one's gender. It is deeply personal and a sense of one's gender. Moving beyond the binary understanding of gender involves recognizing and validating diverse gender identities. There are diverse gender identities, including what? Agender. Agender is someone who identifies as having no gender. That is agender. Bigender has to do with what? Identifying as having two genders. And of course, gender fluid. Having gender fluid has to do with having a gender identity that changes over time. And of course, two spirit. Two spirit is a term. Two spirit is a term that is used by some indigenous cultures in North America to describe a person who embodies both masculine and feminine spirits. So, acknowledging these identities is vital for fostering inclusivity and respect. Now, gender expression and its significance. Gender expression and its significance. Gender expression actually refers to how individuals present their gender through external uh, characteristics such as clothing, hairstyles, and even behavior. So it is important because self-expression allows individuals to express their true selves. Another reason why it's important is visibility. It enhances the visibility and acceptance of diverse gender identities and social interaction. It affects how individuals interact with and are perceived by others. So, supporting diverse gender expressions involves creating environments where people feel safe and accepted, regardless of how they choose to express their gender. Now, let us quickly look at another aspect: intersectionality. Intersectionality has to do with how gender intersects with other identities. So intersectionality is a framework. It's actually a framework for understanding how various aspects of a person's social and political identities, combine to create unique models of discrimination and privilege. There are some key points we need to get here. A person's social and political identities has to do with example like their gender, their race, their class, their sexuality, or their ability. How does it combine to create unique modes of discrimination and privilege? Some key points, like I just said, we need to know. One, compounded discrimination. Compounded discrimination is a situation where individuals experience multiple or overlapping forms of discrimination. We call it compounded discrimination. Then, of course, there's also unique experiences. Each person's experience of gender is influenced by other aspects of their identity. And approaches. Holistic approaches has to do with what? Effective gender diversity initiatives must consider intersectionality to address the unique needs of all individuals. Now, let's pick some very short case studies because examining real life case studies helps to illustrate the complexities and challenges faced by individuals with diverse gender identities. For example, case study one: a non-binary individual who is navigating workplace conflicts and societal expectations. Another case is where a transgender student is advocating for inclusive policies in their school. And another case is where a two-spirit person working to preserve cultural traditions while seeking recognition and respect in broader society. These case studies highlight the importance of inclusive practices and the impact of supportive environment in on individuals' well-being. Yes, we must get this very clearly. Now we move quickly to module 3 that talks about gender equality and equity. There's a difference between gender equality and gender equity. Now, gender equality has to do with what? Ensuring that individuals have equal rights, equal responsibilities, and opportunities regardless of gender. That is gender equality. But gender equity recognizes that different genders may require different resources and opportunities to achieve equality. That is very correct. So, understanding this concept is crucial for designing effective policies and practices that promote fairness and inclusivity. Yes, gender equality means everybody should have the same responsibilities, the same rights, and the same opportunities. But gender equity goes a little bit deeper. It has to ensure that there are some resources that needs to be provided to a certain class of people so that they can be of equal status with others. That is the gender equity. It is actually here in some of the diagrams. Now, what are the barriers? The barriers to gender equality. There are several barriers that hinders gender equality, including what? Stereotypes. Number one is stereotypes and bias. Stereotypes and bias. Persistent stereotypes about gender roles and abilities. These are some of the barriers to gender equality. Number two is economic disparities. Wage gaps, salary gaps, and unequal access to economic opportunities. These are barriers. Number three is legal and policy gaps, inadequate legal protections and policies that fail to address gender-specific needs. And number four is cultural norms. We have some deep-seated cultural beliefs and practices that perpetuate gender inequality. So addressing these barriers requires comprehensive strategies and sustained efforts. Now, what are the strategies for promoting gender equity? Promoting gender equity actually involves one, policy development. That is, creating policies that address gender-specific needs and promote equality. Two, education and awareness. That means raising awareness about gender issues and even promoting inclusive practices. Three, in terms of strategies for promoting gender equality. Three is empowerment programs, supporting initiatives that empower individuals of all genders. And four is inclusive practices, implementing practices that recognizes and even accommodate gender diverse identities. Now, let us quickly look at some case studies too. Successful gender equity initiatives. Studying successful gender equity initiatives provides valuable insights. Very simple case studies. Doesn't have to be that much big. Case study one is a corporate mentorship program for women and non-binary individuals. Yes, when an organization sets up a mentorship program for women and non-binary individuals, that is a successful gender equity initiatives. Case study two is where a community-led initiative supporting transgender rights and services. That is another one. Another case study is what? A government policy that is aimed at closing the gender wage gap. That is another example. So these examples actually demonstrate the effectiveness of targeted strategies in promoting gender equality. Quickly, we move to module 4, which has to do with what? Gender in the workplace. Gender in the workplace. Very simple. Gender in the workplace. Gender diversity in the workplace is critical for several reasons. Gender diversity in the workplace is very critical for several reasons. One, innovation and creativity is one of the reasons. Because diverse teams bring varied perspectives, leading to innovative solutions. Two, employee satisfaction. Inclusive workplaces tend to have higher employee satisfaction and retention. Three, reputation and competitiveness. That means companies known for their diversity and inclusive practices often attract top talents, and even enjoy better reputation. Now, how do we overcome gender bias and stereotypes? Overcoming gender bias and stereotypes. How do we overcome them? To overcome gender bias and stereotypes, organizations can do what? One, training and what? Education. That means organizations can implement training programs to raise awareness and reduce biases. Yes. Two, inclusive policies. Organizations can develop and enforce policies that promote gender equality and even prevent discrimination. These are ways that organizations can overcome gender bias and stereotypes. And the third way is diverse leadership. Ensure diverse representation in leadership positions to set the tone for inclusion. That is another important aspect. Now, how do we create inclusive work environments? Creating inclusive work environments, involves what? Supportive culture. That means fostering a culture of respect and inclusion. Two, flexible policies, which involves implementing flexible work policies to accommodate diverse needs. And of course, three, employee resource groups. That means supporting groups that provide a platform for underrepresented employees. These are ways of creating an inclusive work environment. That is supportive culture, fostering a culture of respect, flexible policies, and even employee resource groups, supporting groups that provide a platform for underrepresented employees. Now, let us quickly look at some case studies there again under gender diversity program in organizations. Analyzing case studies of successful gender diversity programs offers practical insights. Case study one: a tech company that implements a comprehensive diversity and inclusion strategy. That is a very beautiful one. And another case study is what? A healthcare organization's initiative to support transgender employees. The case study three is a situation where a financial firm's effort to achieve gender parity in leadership roles. These case studies illustrate how strategic initiatives can enhance gender diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Quickly, we move to Module 5, where we will look at legal and policy frameworks. Legal and policy frameworks that has to do with international and national gender equality laws. So gender equality laws at international and national levels play a crucial role in promoting gender diversity and protecting the rights of individuals across various gender identities. Now, we have some key international frameworks. Some of them include: one, Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, that is CEDAW. Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW. This is an international treaty that is adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1979, and it outlines measures for ending discrimination against women in all forms. That is an international law. Then there's the Yogyakarta Principles. The Yogyakarta Principles is a set of principles on the application of international human rights law in relation to sexual orientation and gender identity. These are international international laws and frameworks. Now, at the national level, gender equality laws vary, but often include maybe anti-discrimination acts, laws that prohibit discrimination based on gender and other characteristics in employment, education and other areas. Then there's gender recognition laws, that this has to do with legislation that allows individuals to change their legal gender to match their gender identity. Then we have Equal Pay Acts, laws that aim at closing the gender gap by ensuring equal pay for equal work. These are various ways. Now, let us look at gender policies and their implementation. Gender policies and their implementation. Now, we should get it very clearly. Effective gender policies are essential for translating legal principles into practice. So these policies often focus on what? Workplace inclusion, education, and healthcare. Yes. So these gender policies focus on workplace inclusion. Now, in workplace inclusion, we're talking about policies promoting equal opportunities and accommodations of all genders in the workplace. Then the aspect of education must have to do with policies that ensure equal access to educational opportunities and resources. These are policies that are essential for translating legal principles into practice within organizations. Then the aspect of healthcare. These are policies that address gender-specific healthcare needs and promote equitable access to services. Now, how do we implement? Now, talking about implementation strategies. Now, the implementation strategies include what? Training and education. So there should be, training and education has to do with programs to educate employees, students, and the general public about gender diversity and equality. Monitoring and evaluation, which has to do with regular assessment of policies to ensure they are effectively promoting gender diversity and addressing any gaps or challenges. And stakeholder engagement, which involving various stakeholders, including government, NGOs, private sector, and the development and even implementation of gender policies. Now, let us quickly look at one very important aspect: rights and protections for diverse gender identities. Rights and protections for diverse gender identities. Protecting the rights of individuals with diverse gender identities requires specific legal and policy measures, such as one, there's this non-discrimination protections. Non-discrimination protections has to do with laws that explicitly prohibit discrimination based on gender identity and expression. Two, access to legal documentation. That has to do with procedures that allow individuals to change their legal documents. Example, like maybe their birth certificates or their passports to reflect their gender identity. Then there's hate crime legislation. Hate crime legislation. That has to do with laws that address and penalize hate crimes, motivated by gender identity or expression. These protections are essential for ensuring that all individuals can live free from discrimination and violence. This has to do with protecting the rights of individuals with diverse gender identity